Hello and welcome to the Crimson Misery Podcast, episode 31. My name is Will Rainbolt. I hope you all are doing well. It is February 17th, 2025, and you all know what to do, folks. If you are listening on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts, consider rating the show 5 stars. If you are listening on YouTube, like, comment, subscribe. And we have a special episode today. We have the first guest on the Crimson Misery Podcast, and that is none other than Emma Vigeland of the Majority Report of ESVN show. She is on Twitter and Instagram and Blue Sky. I almost forgot the name. Emma Vigeland. Obviously, at the Majority Report, check them out. They do great work. I cannot recommend them enough. And if you are able, consider becoming a member of that channel. It would really help them out a lot, especially for left-wing media spaces. So I'm very grateful for Emma to take the time out of her day to chat with me, and it was a really good conversation. So I cannot wait for you all to hear it. So, but with that being said, we have a couple of results that I wanted to break down really quickly for you all, or at least just talk about before I play the interview. On Sunday, we had a couple of big results. Texas defeated LSU 65-58. Number 3 Texas beats number 5 LSU. Despite Adisa Morrow having 20 rebounds in this one and 15 points, it was not enough. Texas defense held very strongly in the fourth quarter, holding LSU to just 9 points. And Madison Booker had 16 points and 10 rebounds. Very excited to see this Texas team come tournament time, especially when you have secondary scoring options like Taylor Jones and Roy Harmon. Justice Carlton had a couple blocks that were very big down the stretch. So, and for LSU, they're a really good team. They're probably an Elite Eight squad, but at the same time, I just feel like they're going to get exposed by a better team in in the Elite Eight. So, yeah, for LSU, for Kim Mulkey. Ha ha. Anyway, so, and then UConn blew out South Carolina at South Carolina, 87-58. Joyce Edwards was one of the only South Carolina players in double figures, and then obviously you had Azzi Fudd having 28 points. Paige Beckers didn't really have a great shooting night, just 3 of 12, but had 12 points. Sarah Strong had 16 points and 13 rebounds. And then, again, for South Carolina, it's just, without Camila Cardoso, it's really difficult for South Carolina to stop a lot of, especially a lot of UConn's bigs, especially if a team is quicker than they are, which is definitely more so the case this year. It is really concerning to see this happen. And yes, South Carolina is 23-3. They're still a really good team. Their only 3 losses are to UCLA, UConn, and Texas. All very good teams, but this is a year where South Carolina might not actually, I still think it's possible they make the Final Four, but not with the way they're currently playing. They have a lot of depth even still, but I still think Joyce Edwards and Mylasia Full-Wiley should be starting. I haven't been impressed with Raven Johnson or Bree Hall as of late, but we'll see. I mean, it could all, South Carolina could go undefeated the rest of the way, and I'll eat crow for that one. So, but yeah, with that, also, UCLA also bounces back after they lost at USC. They beat Michigan State 75-69. I see later today you have Duke at Notre Dame. That's going to be a pretty interesting one to watch. We'll see. Now new number 1 Notre Dame, which isn't Texas, which I was really surprised about. But anyway, with that being said, let's flip over to a couple men's games really quickly before I play the interview with Emma. St. John's beats Creighton 79-73. RJ Lewis, a player that might be a sneaky pick for the player of the year in the Big East right now. He had 23 points and 14 rebounds in this one. Creighton, Ryan Kalkbrenner got hurt. in the second half in this one. He had 12 points, but also when his absence was definitely felt. When he plays well, Creighton is really scary to play, but when he isn't playing well or just simply isn't playing, it isn't. It's not a very good sign for Creighton. I mean, Stephen Ashworth had a really good game. Jemiah Neal had 19 points. But R.J. Lewis had 23. Zuby Ejiofor, one of my favorite big guys in the entire country, despite going 2 of 8 from the free throw line, had 18 points. Kadari Richmond, 19 points. This St. John's team plays a kind of defense that is just like, it hurts to watch, but it hurts to watch because you physically feel the pain that they inflict on the offenses that they face. So anyway, Wichita State beat Memphis in overtime. Memphis at 14th in the country, upset by Wichita State. I thought this was a game that they could lose. That in the game against UAB, I think they can lose. But overall, great win for Wichita State, even though they're still not in the tournament, even close to an at-large. But for Memphis, as long as they go the rest of the way with maybe a loss, and maybe that is to UAB, I still think Memphis is in pretty good shape come tournament time. So a couple other results in the mid-majors. Bradley beats Drake on the road after the game-winning dunk to end the game for, I believe, was it? Darius Hannah had the game-winning dunk with 10 seconds left, and Drake could not convert on the other end. So Bradley is now 12-4 in the Missouri Valley. Drake is 13-3. So while Drake is still ahead, Bradley has definitely made this race a little bit closer. So, then I also wanted to talk, Maryland beat Iowa 101-75 after, Maryland started combined points. That's crazy. Jacoby Gillespie had a really good game, Julian Reese and Derek Queen. That is a talented roster. Rodney Rice too, man. And Iowa, especially without Owen Freeman, just was not happening for him. So, and then Michigan wins on the road against Ohio State, 86-83. Michigan still up there in those Big Ten standings. The combo of Danny Wolf and Vladislav Golden is just incredible to watch. So then Green Bay and Doug Gottlieb, they won a game. I said it last episode that Green Bay, at least covering the spread, and they get a win here. They were 9.5-point underdogs, and they beat Wright State 79-68. I'm so happy that they'll extend Doug Gottlieb for all the laughs that I'll be able to get next season. And especially this season, trust me, the making fun of Doug Gottlieb will not stop. I think I just said Doug Gottlieb. I will not stop making fun of him. He is the gift that will keep on giving. Again, as I've pointed out before, he is like that South Park episode where Cartman keeps laughing at that really short person that comes in for sensitivity training. That is Doug Gottlieb to me. I cannot get enough of that. So. And then the final game I wanted to talk about, New Mexico at home, 82-79. New Mexico is pretty much wrapped up the Mountain West race at this point. Unless they have a complete fall off, New Mexico is looking really good right now at 14-1. Utah State now 12-3. Despite Mason Falstaff having 27 points and 6 rebounds, True Washington was the big star in this one, especially when Utah State rallied to tie it after they were down 7. True Washington hit a big 3 to basically seal the game for New Mexico. This is a team that's really scary to watch for come tournament time. You do not want to face New Mexico. Utah State looks a little more vulnerable, but at the same time, they're still on the 8-9 line, I think. New Mexico probably 7-ish, I would say. But with that being said, thank you all very much for listening, and I will end this episode not in the episode, but continue the episode that will then end the episode with my interview with Emma Vigeland. Again, big thanks to her. She is the best, and you all check out her socials, and also check out the Majority Report. Consider becoming a member. And yeah, I will see you all next time with more college basketball updates. So thanks to everyone for listening and enjoy the interview. Bye bye.
All right, so with me right now is the great Emma Vigeland of the Majority Report of ESVN. Emma, welcome to the Crimson Misery podcast. You are the first guest on this podcast. How does
I
that
am
feel?
very honored. Thank you so much, Will, for having me on your show. One of our most regular and most thoughtful IMers. Happy to do it.
Yeah, I'm grateful to be a member of the Majority Report. I'm lucky to f have followed your career since you worked at TYT and gosh, following you probably since I was in high school. Like, I mean, just to have this moment here now. But for those of you who maybe aren't aware of Emma, what is it that exactly you do? What do you talk about on the Majority Report? What is your whole shtick about?
My whole deal? Yeah.
Yeah.
So on the Majority Report, we're a daily left-wing political show where every day, noon Eastern, we'll have guests, experts on specific sets of policy, or sometimes we'll just break down the news, and there's so much news to talk about. So we cover that every day, Monday through Friday. I co-host with Sam Cedar. He hired me in 2020, and I came over and joined as the co-host after the tragic passing of the great Michael Brooks. And I've been there so now for over 4 years. It's been a phenomenal 4 years of my career, and I feel like I grow and learn something new every day.
Yeah, and obviously, for those who don't know, the great Michael Brooks, he was an incredible ambassador for a lot of international politics, a lot of socialist politics, and he is obviously missed so much. But Emma, you've done a great job as co-host of the Majority Report since you maybe isn't like filling in his shoes, but like still offering up a voice in the left-wing media sphere. And I think that's so important, especially with the different types of guests that you all have on. That is something I can't recommend enough about the show, me
Appreciate
personally.
that.
So like that's something that draws a lot of people in who are interested in politics. And then you get like stuff like the fun half if you become a Majority Report member, where we get to see you all dunk on people like Charlie Kirk and Ben Shapiro and Matt
Uh,
Walsh. So
I forgot about that. Yes, the best way really for us to launder our views and get people interested in political content is when you put it into the context of making fun of a right winger. So this the perfect example from recently was Sam. I don't think I was in for that day, but dunking on Tim Pool, completely not understanding Social Security, and we went. If we were to just do a video about how does Social Security work, how does Social Security get funded, it would probably get about 5% of the views that a video that is the exact same in terms of the content and the information and education that's being delivered for people that it would get if you're making fun of Tim Pool as you do it. So if you see some of our clips and that it's wait, I thought they were supposed to be so academic, but they're making fun of a bunch of right wingers. That part's fun, but we also try to make it informative as well on occasion.
yeah, but you have to know your audience in that way. And I think
Right.
that's something that a lot of people on the left get a lot of glee over, but it's also it is very academic, as you said, like informing people about how this actually works. So, and I wanted, I guess, to start off with, especially where obviously we're dealing with a lot with the current Trump administration and how Trump is basically, and Elon Musk to an extent is taking a wrecking ball to different federal agencies and basically trashing so many federal workers and all of the like. And so for me, it's really indicative that the quote unquote opposition party, being the Democrats, aren't really putting up a really good fight for it. And so I was just and you talked about it on the show earlier today. It's like how badly to you have the Democrats, and I'm talking, when I say Democrats, I mean, for those of you like maybe, oh, is he talking about the entire party? Like, I'm talking about the people who are supposed to be the ones opposing the fascism of Donald Trump. And so, how badly have those people screwed it up, like massively for this current this state?
Well, it's just really unfortunate because we could have taken the first Trump era as an opportunity to build something that met the moment that his first election really epitomized, which is that people are deeply dissatisfied with our politics, with our political system, with what exists of our democracy, and we see more and more that the mechanisms for democratic representation are shrinking, and whether it be by things like gerrymandering, but also just a lack of democratic responsiveness. I think people feel like there's no point in the way our politics exists because it just feels like a series of bureaucratic choices, and often because we have this really inefficient public private contractor model for much of our government institutions, it is inefficient. And nobody knows, like, oh, if we just had a fully publicly available, say, healthcare option, that would make things a lot easier for you and it would drive down costs, because we don't have a Democratic Party that's communicating that clearly. And so it leaves so much open, so much wide open kind of playing field for the Republicans to define government waste, fraud, and abuse in whatever the way they want to get their agenda across. And the Democrats suffer from the fact that they are basically a coalition of people that range from AOC and Rashida Tlaib to like Josh Gottheimer and Joe Manchin. Thankfully, he's out of the Senate now. Yeah. But it's everybody who isn't an outright fascist. And there are a lot of folks that are extreme Zionists within that coalition as well. So they may be a bit fashy when it comes to the Middle East. But in terms of domestically, that's what the Democrats are. They're a coalition of everybody who is not that. And I think it makes things very difficult. And they are just not as strong of a party for that very reason. And so I think we have to start to weed out some of the members that are happy to be ineffectual and sit on their hands. And unfortunately, right now, it's epitomized by Democratic leadership, whether it be in the House or whether it be in the Senate, Jeffries and Schumer. They are institutionalists. And you see how they are almost just shocked by the constituent reaction for them to begging them to do something, because for liberals have been told that resisting Donald Trump is extremely important. And that doesn't just go away overnight because Morning Joe goes and kisses the ring down at Mar-a-Lago. Like, the audience actually believe this stuff because they're right to believe it. And they expect more of their elected representatives. So the good news is that while Democratic leadership is really bad right now and not responsive to the base, I do see some changes with Democratic politicians. You know, I've been using this example for the past week because I think it's a good one. Jasmine Crockett is a lawmaker who is not probably ideologically as aligned with me as I would like. And she's on the Democratic side, but she takes crypto money, which is a massive scam and should be disqualifying for Democrats, like, who want to be taken seriously, say, on the presidential level. And she voted to arm Israel, which I really, really don't like. But what I appreciate about with her and why she and other politicians like her should be invited into this anti-fascist coalition is that she'll do partisanship with the Republicans. She'll go after them. She'll make fun of Nancy Mace. She'll make fun of Marjorie Taylor Greene, and she'll attack them, which is what we need because they are open for attack. And so it's not really about partisan. It's not really about even ideology fully when we're trying to bring as many people into our coalition as possible to fight these guys. But it is about, are you willing to fight? And I think that's really the mark of what we're seeing is with leadership and some of the other members who are more willing to go down that road and fight Republicans. That's what you need to do.
Yeah. And another way you can fight Republicans is by getting your base fired up as well, not just with different Democratic leaders of different ideologies, like what you were saying, Emma, but especially with the meat and potatoes of the Democratic base who are a little more left-leaning per se, and especially what I was really like, because you had mentioned, obviously a big, possibly the biggest news story in the last year and a half is the war between, Israel and the genocide really is what I should, it is what it is. It is a genocide that
Yes.
Israel is committing against the Palestinian people and also bombing, five different countries at the same time. Uh, but my point was, as the um, as the Democratic base rather has been polled, uh, what their opinions are on Palestine is that they've become less in favor of Israel, and not just with that sort of issue, but with other left-leaning issues on like economics, like healthcare, like Medicare for all is something that has been championed on the left for so long now, but. Um, how is it that the Democrats, if they learn any sort of lesson, and I'm looking ahead to both like obviously the midterms and in the 2028, general election, um, how is it that the Democrats is it possible that they can win over these types of voters to actually put them over the edge is just what they need aside from the whole thinking of, if we lose to, Bernie supporters, we'll get three, centrist Republicans. It's like, yeah, it's like, how is it possible that the Democrats can do this sort of wrangling in those voters?
Well, I think so. I think it's actually I'm more optimistic about it than some in the sense that like the Biden administration and the stink of that, it's why, even though I do believe that Kamala Harris was like the victim of a lot of racism and misogyny, frankly, from the end of Biden by not setting her up to be his heir apparent as a guy that was about to turn 82 years old.
Yes,
And who,
yes.
like, the fact that he didn't see her as that, I really think set her up to fail. But putting that aside, she should not run in 2028 for the reasons I'm about to say, which is that the stink of that administration is significant, and particularly the genocide in Gaza with the coalitions of people that the Democrats need to win over, which are low propensity Democratic partisans. And they have largely bumped up against the test case that Schumer described, which is like turning out suburban upper middle class folks in the states that they need. They've done that. They are at that point. Everybody who is a high information voter, for the most part, like some of the exit poll indications of who went to Trump, it's people that consume little to no political news and primarily get their news from social media. Everybody that watches cable news, if it's not Fox, everybody that's reading the New York Times, they are already voting for Kamala Harris / Biden. But it wasn't enough this time because there were millions that stayed home. And Trump did turn out some more people. I want to be clear about that. Like there's conflicting data, but it does seem clear that Trump made inroads, particularly with young men and with Latino voters, particularly Latino men. And we have to reverse that trend, but that increase is less significant than the number of people that stayed home, even in states that they thought were safe. And I think it's because working class voters of color, who are the Democrats that need to be turned out, were both disgusted by the Biden administration's genocide in Gaza, but that wasn't the prime. It was a compounding effect of the cost of living issue, which is that housing and rent is at a completely unsustainable point right now. The inflation from the COVID pandemic that was naturally occurring but turned into very quickly price gouging by corporations, where they artificially kept prices very high so they could make record profits, which is what happened. And the Biden administration, despite trying to go after it with antitrust, this got to a point where Biden couldn't communicate really for the final 2 years of his presidency. And so he couldn't, even when he wanted to illustrate that they were addressing it, he wasn't able to communicate that, and people didn't feel it. So prices are too high, rent is unsustainable, and if you're in this class of folks that I'm discussing, you're more likely to be somebody who rents. And then when you turn on your phone, what do you see? Well, you see Palestinian babies exploding on your feed. And it's a very easy narrative to craft. This is what my tax dollars are going to. I don't like this. And you don't need to turn to Trump. You just don't need to turn out. That's millions of people that were a part of the
Yes.
Obama '08 coalition. They can be turned out again. And what turns them out is an agenda that is economically populist and not in the Chris Murphy way, in the real way, that includes a real robust public option at the very least, that includes tuition-free college and student debt cancellation, that includes making foreign policy responsive to the democratic will of the people and not just to a bunch of defense contractors and West exec consultants like, with the Biden administration. So I think the path is straightforward. It's just a question of whether the Democratic Party can meet the moment. It's still an open question.
Yeah. And because it is still like for people to get these material conditions that they are able to live much better on it to me, it doesn't like, because I've always seen like from different liberals, it's like, oh, you get what you voted for. And that isn't the way we as leftists or as like a party, or if you're part of any movement, that isn't what we should be doing to people.
Right.
And that's messaging that like, hey, like like to what you were saying, we shouldn't really you can't really rely on Trump for that because he's just gonna like make
blame
things.
Someone else. I mean, they've shown that this is people say that because they don't want to upset the apple cart, or they it allows them to think there's nothing wrong with the way that we've been operating, whether we're as liberals or Democratic consultants or just voters. We can just do the same thing because the voters will eventually realize it. But it's been abundantly clear that they don't. So especially with the media environments that I described, like I think it's difficult for people like myself it's my job, but even like you, Will, who pays a lot of attention to politics. You may know someone in your life like I do that doesn't understand it at all. And you're like, whoa, we are operating in entirely different realities. And you have to find somebody that breaks through the noise like that with messaging that is not technocratic. It's simple, but not talking down to people. Just it's straightforward. And that's what leftism can provide, because liberalism is bureaucratic for the most part, and it bothers people. And I think we're seeing the end of that politics being viable.
It's from your mouth to God's ears. Like seriously, I'm
Perhaps
just
I'm
really
too optimistic. Look, I thought Kamala would win, right? So I can my brain can reject things that I think are too. And I'm being honest about that. I don't know if I'm right. It feels unsustainable, but I said that about the genocide in Gaza, and here we are.
Yeah, I mean, but that's politics. A lot of the time it is very unpredictable. And look, I've even though it's completely different, like just, this being like the first season I've been covering like college basketball for a podcast. I've been wrong about quite a bit so far. I know it's not the same thing, but like, sometimes we are wrong. And like, but oftentimes there are lessons to be learned about it, and you can provide a different sort of hope and optimism for people that are disillusioned by politics a lot. And I think, and again, maybe that is also part of like the optimism I try to have about the world, even though it's really bleak. But also like I was kind of switching over a little bit into like the sports world. I think you had alluded to it. It's like, the prospect of Republicans blaming other, like, and especially the Trump administration blaming, DEI and immigrants and trans people for a lot of the struggles of the work, like of what you're basically seeing now happening with the Trump administration, and just taking a sledgehammer to everything. But I covered this story on my podcast recently about the NCAA complying with the Trump administration for their base essential banning for trans people, trans athletes competing in the NCAA.
The less than 10 that are trans athletes in the NCAA.
Yes.
Yeah.
And Charlie Baker, president of the NCAA, I don't have the quote verbatim, but he was essentially like President Trump's new basically is having this to where it can't it isn't decided by the states and can be uh this can be like throughout every level of the NCAA. And I've said less than kind things about Charlie Baker in the past. So I've said it before, but he's just an utter sleazebag. And I just wanted to get your thoughts about just how far this is unfortunately going for people who are so vulnerable. And it's like you said, only less than 10
Yep.
and it just how terrible this is really going to get, because they are not stopping with just trans people either. And so I wanted to get your thought as someone who has stood up for the trans community and the LGBTQ plus community and all of the like. And so I wanted to really get your thoughts on that as well.
I
So
appreciate the question. Well, yeah, I mean, I think that you see how quickly the NCAA is capitulating. Like the Trump administration also, this is going to go get less reported, but it just got or get less attention, but it just happened today. They reversed the Biden administration I think NLRB classification of NCAA athletes as workers.
I did see that. Yeah. Yeah, that was really depressing.
But that benefits the NCAA, right? They don't
Yep.
have to worry about, they can get free labor again. We don't have to worry about it. And it throws cold water on other unionization efforts among college athletes, even as, they're making millions and millions of dollars for their university and not getting a cut out of it except the prospect of a dream of playing in the pros. And particularly with college football, where injury risk is so incredibly high, it's just an extremely exploitative system that many Southern colleges are the most attached to, and you can understand why they would want free labor from a largely black population,
Yes.
so that they can keep paying the Tommy Tubervilles of the world, tens of millions of dollars. But for trans athletes, it's a great example of why we need government regulation, because without the government saying you have to fairly treat these you have to treat these 10 less than 10 NCAA trans athletes fairly, it's so obvious what they're going to do. They're just going to ban them and say, well, what can we do? Our hands are tied. They would so much rather do that than have to deal with like the headache of conservative groups suing, of a bunch of right-wing moms getting mad at them because their daughter, their cis daughter, may have to compete against a trans woman. Like this has presented issues for the NCAA that I'm not sympathetic to them, but it's also the role of the federal government to put an end to this. But they have, right? They have put an end to it. They've basically said you can't compete. And there will be suits, I'm sure, and there will be efforts for these athletes to compete. But the incentive is not going to be to protect the less than 10 people. It's going to be to go towards the most profitable thing, which is to say, like, you guys hit the road. We're not dealing with this issue. And so that's how discrimination happens. It's why we need federal discrimination laws. It's why it's been important. It's been important since the government has changed who had the ability to vote, from white landowning men to now anybody who's a citizen theoretically and not a felon can vote, and you may have to go through a bunch of obstacles to do so, and especially if you're a low-wage worker, you can't get time off, whatever. But these are all rights that we decided we're going to give to people, and you can take them away, and there are real ramifications of it and for it. Such a disgusting way to marginalize such an already marginalized population that already can't get access to the care they need, that already is basically being told you don't exist. Now we're going to single you out, like less than 10.
Yeah.
A federal executive order. That's obviously more about the message that it sends than it is about the individual cases.
But Emma, have you ever thought about Riley Gaines' feelings about this? No.
Oh, it's all I think about. It's all I think about. I mean, we have to, isn't it telling that the conservative victims are always white women. Like,
Hmm.
and this goes back to lynching. And I put this up there as a white woman myself because when the one time that Ben Shapiro put me on his show, which like I wasn't expecting it, but he put me on his show, was to make fun of me when I said that there was a homeless man that had a mental episode next to me where I got hit because he was flailing around on the subway and I didn't want him summarily executed on the subway. And
What a terrible thing to say.
what a horrible
Oh,
thing. But
wow.
it's because they truly see conservatives look at white women as extensions of themselves, as the
Yes.
basically the women that they are there to protect. And there's something that you can tap into with their fragile sense of masculinity that trans people really threaten. And you notice how it's always an obsession with trans women and not with trans men.
Hmm.
And it's because one, these conservatives are afraid that they're going to be sexually attracted to a trans woman. That is like the base fear underneath it.
And we have seen plenty of evidence for this,
And
by the
we
way.
have, and they
Yeah.
probably consume that kind of content, adult material on the internet, although they would
Yeah.
never admit it. It's the shame they feel later. Then the piece about Riley Gaines or Laken Riley, they have to save them from a scary immigrant. It's because they are white women who have Laken Riley murdered, killed, horrific. Riley Gaines came tied for fifth place with a trans swimmer. These are not analogous, but like they're still being used to take away the rights from somebody else. And the the visceral reaction to protect that white woman that they create with conservative men is being weaponized for either anti-LGBTQ ends or racist ends in the case of Lake and Riley.
And also, it's like the propping up of like the right-wing media sphere that because Riley Gaines is now on like that outkick that fucking Clay Travis guy
Oh,
has, and like Dan Dockage, like I've talked about him, like just how much from like an ESPN college basketball commentator to like this right-wing nut job. It's like that is just a cesspool, and it gets funded by these different these like right-wing funds, these and these donors that not just with right-wing sports media, but just right-wing media in general, are get these like loads of funds that often left-wing media does not have. And I think that's also important for the sake of shows like yours. I mean, shows like, Secular Talk with Kyle Kalinske,
for
and
sure.
others. And obviously, with Francesca Fiorentini, who's awesome. A lot of those people, obviously, I hold on. Uh, and it's and we see them not getting much funding, and so I think that's also part of it as to why they're just so out there, and conservatives are always like we're canceled for showing our opinions, this we're against woke, and it's like, but you never leave our screens for because you're just always propped up by these like insanely rich like billionaires and donors that are able to project your insecurities on to everyone else. And I think that's also part of why people are getting this sort of misinformation from different forms of social media. And that can also lead to possibly like low uh not low IQ voters, but just low information voters that are like, consuming a lot of like the anti-woke type deal.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we have a media literacy problem in this country, and like, I really do think that the Joe Rogan podcast is a great example of what that has wrought, which is just a lot of charlatans that go on there and they have fancy degrees. But, Sidney Powell went to Duke Law School. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be somebody that has, I don't know, like something coherent to say. But people that look like experts and have fooled a lot of people into thinking that they are. And one of them just became, Secretary of Health and Human Services, RFK Jr.
Yeah. And it is just it's like that whole tech bro thing with Elon Musk and Peter Thiel that are essentially in our government now and can also just get these like different right-wing takes out there that are conflicting with what we obviously want for this country, which is why it was also like kind of interesting to see different people go with talk about like maybe like the liberal Joe Rogan or someone like, Donald Trump who has like kind of like a celebrity status to run for president. And so people have been like saying like Stephen A. Smith is a possible candidate, which is like, I mean, I've seen some of his worst takes recently, and I'm like,
I
because
know.
like I was wanting to hear your thoughts on that, Emma, before like,
Well, I'm a New York sports fan, so I'm familiar with Stephen A. Smith, and I know that his politics are not going to be that great. Like he's described himself as a centrist. So that's
yeah,
kind of I'm over it at that point. And he said something about trans athletes that I didn't like.
oh yeah,
Even the Jon Stewart stuff, like maybe I'm too up my own ass or whatever. I would like a politician to run for president and not a celebrity. Call me crazy. I
well,
just
yeah,
like want somebody who has political skill and it's a different game. Like Trump literally just comes out there and says whatever the hell he wants and the entire Republican Party excuses it because at the end of the day all they want is tax cuts for the rich. Like it's a very different game to sell leftist or left-wing progressive policy to the American public. And Stephen A is getting shine because he's been going on Sean Hannity's show and debating him. Well, he's been doing a good job because Stephen A is a very talented speaker and I my favorite New York radio personality still to this day, sports radio personality. Like and for all my misgivings, he's by far the most entertaining and still like has takes about the Knicks that aren't just the most insane thing. Like there's some really bad New York area hosts like, Mad Dog or
oh God, yeah,
Anita Marks. So I still take Stephen A over them in that category, but it seems like he's friends with Sean Hannity. Like that's how
Mhm.
it looks like they've been at some fancy dinners together and they want to recreate their banter and they just put it on his show. I don't trust anybody that's friends with Stephen A. Smith. Are you kidding me? So we've got to get serious about this. My feeling is that as of again February 2025, we're still so far out. But so many of the problems with the Democratic Party are concentrated in Washington. We're seeing much better Democrats come out as governors of states where they act as people in the executive branch. So they're interested in governing, like Tim Walz, who said political capital is about burning your political capital. And they did free school and lunch in Minnesota. J.B. Pritzker,
yeah,
Gretchen
yeah.
Whitmer, like Pritzker's a billionaire, but he could be an FDR type figure. I'm like being really, this is best case scenario, right? Like, but my point is if history rhymes and we're in the Gilded Age right now and we really do crypto, I'm seeing it's already starting to get into like teachers' pension funds. Like this is the kind of crap that could help crash our economy if it gets into too many sectors and crashes. Although it's the lack of derivatives element of it could just be like, all right, bunch of shitty people lose money. That's the best case scenario. But we would need somebody that comes into office who wants to burn political capital and permanently destroy the power of this billionaire class and
Hmm.
then safeguard our regulatory institutions from the kind of destruction that we're seeing. And the way that you do that is you have somebody who doesn't give a flying F. And I see that could come from the AOC, like AOC, right? I still think people are being too skeptical about her. Just because we had a woman just lose doesn't mean they're the same level of political talent. AOC has a lot of credibility with folks that aren't just like vote blue no matter who people. So, and a guy like Pritzker, I could see them having a different, vision, but being both potentially successful. I still have to wait and see if Pritzker supports things like single payer, but I think he's a promising candidate.
Hell, even like, Andy Bashir, even though like I'm not
And Bashir, yeah.
yeah, I'm not incredibly sold on him, but like he's still solid. I mean, I think for as much as like sometimes AOC can be a little bit like, I don't agree with like obviously everything that she has said or done, especially with her comments on, Palestine during I think the DNC.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I mean, obviously should be in Jerry Connolly's spot right now. Like that's what are we doing? It's she certainly isn't being helped out by the party. I will say that. But I think AOC would be, I mean, if she runs for president, like she has a pretty good shot to do well. And I would definitely be fine with that for
Her
sure.
floor is higher than people realize. Like for women under 40 that are already voting in the Democratic primary, first of all, you need part of the problem is that you need to win over Democratic vote blue no matter who people by being a sort of outsidery person that can have that appeal outside of the primary. Where Bernie, that's where he bumped up against it, where and even Nina Turner is an example on a smaller scale where because she voted for Jill Stein in 2016, I mean, honestly, that ended her campaign right there. There was APAC money too and
Yeah.
all this stuff. But that's a certain thing where we're not at a point right now where Democratic voters can turn that off in their brain. And I think Bernie had that issue too, where then they played up the sexism and the misogyny that he doesn't possess, but that
Right.
some of his supporters engaged in just because that's going to happen in any political movement. And they played it up and it turned off like women who are just kind of like liberals who wanted to vote for Hillary Clinton, and it created that dividing line. AOC, this is where she's getting underestimated. Any woman under 40 who's voting Democrat likes her, almost anyone.
Mhm.
And she still has that appeal and working class credentials outside of the party with voters who may not be traditional Democratic voters, but would get excited about the prospect of a candidate like her. So I still think she's getting underestimated. What I do think is probably likely is that she's just not full of herself enough to actually run for president.
We'll see. Yes. Okay. So with that, you obviously I also aside from hosting or co-hosting the Majority Report, you're the host of ESVN show that I've kind of I was able to talk some March Madness with you before, and obviously I am the show. And so like and obviously you've been covering the NFL season. Y'all are on hiatus currently, but I just wanted to hear your thoughts like on this season in general and yeah, just how just in the Super Bowl as well that just happened between the
Huh.
Eagles and Chiefs and just how much what are your thoughts overall on all of that?
So I've been because of the election, I'm like more disengaged from college basketball almost than I've ever been. So you may need to inform me, or I'm gonna have to listen to get my updates. But
Well, I would love that.
in
I would
terms of
love
the
that.
NFL, okay, perfect.
Yeah,
Um,
sure.
in terms of the NFL season, it was an interesting one for me as a Giants fan. It was a devastating one because like Saquon Barkley went over to the Eagles and then won the Super Bowl with them, which was very well deserved. I mean, the Eagles, people don't understand how talented they are as a team and how well run they are as an organization. Really, I mean, since Jeffrey Lurie got the team, they've just been always accumulating talent, even when they came up short in the Super Bowl where they faced Brady early on in the 2000s. I'm forgetting exactly which one that was, but like they had Brian Dawkins on that team. They've been stacked, and they had those. That was the one of the McNabb teams, I
Hmm.
believe. Um,
2004? It
I
was
think it was 2004. I didn't want to say it definitively, but yeah,
I
I think so.
because I was the Panthers Super Bowl before that, or was it the Eagles that was before that? I'm
I think it was
forgetting.
the Panthers Super Bowl that was first, and that was after the snow game against the Raiders. That's
Yes.
my belief.
Okay.
So like they're just immensely talented. They have the best offensive line in the sport, and they arguably have the best defensive line. Like Jalen Carter is a top three defensive tackle at this point, and they have just more depth on that side of the ball than most of the other teams that have a superstar at that position. And so they are showing what it really takes to win in the NFL, which is to have elite players and elite coaching on in the trenches. Because it opens you up to do other things. Like Jalen Hurts on a team with a worse offensive line would not look like the guy that he does in
No.
Philadelphia. And most quarterbacks wouldn't, right? So I just think that I was rooting for a Chiefs three-peat because of my dislike for the Philadelphia Eagles. But
That's fair.
overall, the better team won. And you saw how they were able to win was that they ran up the score early on because the Chiefs were so successful. And I think we're almost like, I forgot the statistic off the top of my head, but breaking records in close games. Like if it was within 1 or 6 points, the Eagles would, I mean, the Chiefs would always come back because that's the Mahomes factor. That's his clutchness.
Yeah.
That's his greatness. But as an overall team, gosh, like I would take the Eagles offensive line and their whole defensive line as in total, yes, over Chris Jones and Karl Laftis at this point in Chris Jones's career. I'm of course taking Jalen Carter. And that group, I am. And Josh Sweat. Both of those lines, I'm taking over the Chiefs. I'm taking the receiver group over them, of course.
Yeah.
With AJ Brown and Devonta Smith, even their corners as a group, like Quinyon Mitchell, Darius Slay, Cooper DeJean. I'm taking all those guys over the Chiefs. So outside of the quarterback position, the running back, of course we're taking Saquon over like Pacheco, who could barely run at the end of the year after his injury, and a 32-year-old what's his face? Gosh, Kareem Hunt.
Yeah.
Like, the Eagles were extremely talented, and I think the only team on offense that could have kept up with them really was the Detroit Lions, but they had dozens of injuries on defense that hampered them. And unfortunately, some of my favorite bar trivia is what are the 4 teams that have never been to a Super Bowl?
Been to a Super Bowl.
Do you know, Will? I
Okay.
kind of gave away one of them.
Lions. Lions
Yes.
being one of them.
Yeah.
Browns.
Uh-huh.
And
2 expansion teams.
Texans.
Mm-hmm.
And I need to hold on. I need to think about this.
Jaguars.
Jaguars.
In this
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
that has been since the expansion the case, right?
Yeah.
And I feel bad for Lions fans for that reason.
I do too.
Now they've lost their 2 dynamite coordinators. Specifically Ben Johnson to Chicago is rough, but they're a bounce back team. And what's interesting is like my Giants have had a horrific season, and the free agents that they let walk, like Xavier McKinney, had a career year in Green Bay, for example. It's just been a disaster. But they are in the Matthew Stafford trade rumor talk situation, and that could be something that's fascinating to me if they're not sold on a Cam Ward. I'm out on Shadur Sanders. He's not my guy.
I've been going back and forth. Cam Ward at times this year looked absolutely unstoppable.
Yes.
And so I'm banking on that high-end talent that he has, because I think with the right direction he can be absolutely
great.
Dynamite. Yeah.
But he does have a weird throwing motion, and he might have some conditioning issues is what it looks like to me. But
yeah.
I gotta watch more.
I have to as well. I'll watch more film. Couple more questions, and then I'll get you out of here.
Sure.
This is because the Knicks are, I think they're 3rd in the Eastern Conference currently. I haven't kept up with like so much of the NHL. I've kept up with a little bit of the NBA more so, just because the Pacers have been better than the Blues this year.
Mm-hmm.
But I was just like seeing if you had kept up with any any NBA draft prospects out of college or anything I can if you have any
Not really. I'm about to get back into it. I will be honest with you that the amount of mental energy that the election took up for me, I just fell off so much with my NFL. It's like easy for me. I can follow that fairly easily just because I've been following it as for a while closely. But Outside of the Knicks, I've not been watching too much of the NBA. Although the Rockets are a really fun team for me
I
this year of
yes.
what I've been able to watch. And then the NHL, when the Rangers traded Capo Caco, I said I need a break from this relationship,
Yeah.
basically. So,
Yeah.
I'm getting back into it. I get it. Other franchises have had worse luck than I have, but just after the Kamala loss and then the year covering Gaza, I was like, there's only so much I can take. So,
Yeah.
you'll have to have me back on, and I'll probably have a more thoughtful answer.
Well, I'd really like that if you're whenever you're when able. But for right now, I'll say this, like Cooper Flag for Duke is the real deal. Like I've seen quite a few Duke games this year, and he is spectacular. Like genuinely, like a great player. And then, uh, oddly enough, this is one of my favorite like storylines of the year. Not just because of like who it involves, but it's just kind of insane for me to say. Rutgers has two guys in Ace Bailey, who's like a forward slash center, who's like kind of like who's had some comparisons to like Kevin Durant, and then Dylan Harper, the son of Ron Harper. Both he and Ace Bailey are projected to be top five draft picks, and Rutgers right now is at 500 on the year and like out of the NCAA tournament. That is one of my like
Your
favorite
guys.
stats to, yeah, like those are two of my guys, but also like, yeah, I mean, as like, look, Indiana also hasn't had a great year, but like Rutgers seeing them like kind of implode because I don't like their head coach all that much, Steve Peichel. But those two guys are really good. The rest of the team is just really bad. And going from, I'll just say this, like from a coach that is usually like defense first and is part of this like system that doesn't offer a lot of free range for him to pivot to kind of suit Ace Bailey and Dylan Harper, who are like projected like top five in the NBA draft. It's not worked out very well. So I will say that.
Interesting.
Yeah. So yeah, if that's a good starter. Also Trey Johnson of Texas is one of my favorite players to watch as well. But yeah, I will. But yeah, obviously, once if you're ever able to come back on and have a bit more thoughts about it, that'd be obviously appreciated. But for now, final conversation topic before I let you go. The Traitors. The Traitors.
Big
What,
fan.
yes, what, I mean, what have your thoughts been about this season and just how bizarre it can really get for people?
Spoiler, 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 spoiler for
Spoilers,
everybody.
spoil. Yes, go veer toward the end of the end of the podcast if you want to skip out on this part. But like, yeah, spoiler alert for sure.
I was so devastated about Dorinda
Yeah.
being the first kill. You know, she is truly my favorite housewife of all time, and I mean that in terms of not assessing her as a human being overall because she's had some poor moments, but I love her. I feel for her in her struggles and in her high points, and she's just an endless source of entertainment. But there's something so emotionally vulnerable about Dorinda that I love,
Hmm.
and her like lethalness is great. So I was so bummed out, and they were seemingly targeting the housewives in
Yeah.
particular, which was pissing off all the Bravo fans because I think that they had assumed that they were some sort of like threat, or maybe they'd spoken to other game players from the previous year because like they did stick together, but so do the Big Brother people, so do the Survivor people. Like, why are you
Hmm.
coming for the one group of women? Whatever. And they
Yeah.
eliminated a lot, with the exception of Dolores, the other housewives really early on. So that was disappointing, but it has been cool to get introduced. I never watched Survivor, I never watched Big
Oh.
Brother, any of these other TV shows, but
I'm a big Survivor fan. Yeah.
Sam's a huge Survivor fan, and I haven't talked to him about this, but if I were to tell him Boston Rob was on the show, he might be pretty pumped because loved getting to know him. What a legend, incredible, and
Yeah.
yeah, so I'm bummed that he left, but like he was came in at a disadvantage. The producers bringing those three guys in at the same time, obviously one of them was going to be a traitor,
Yeah, that was really stupid. That
but
was.
I do like that they have made the challenges a little bit more um meaningful with like they expanded how many shields were available to people basically, right?
Mhm.
And I think that that made it harder for the traders. But overall, I have a great time this season. Danielle is just so bad at the game
He
that
is.
I have to root for Carolyn by default. I
Yeah.
like Carolyn. I wouldn't say I'm crazy about Carolyn. Like season one, rooting for Suri was
Sorry, yeah.
extremely exciting
Yeah.
because I respected her game and I liked her at the same time. And she won, and she
Yeah.
deserved it. And all those people that were pissed at her, what the hell was
Oh,
that?
the
Like Andy was
right.
her name,
Yeah. Oh my,
or their
like
name. I'm sorry.
yeah, so yeah, but it was also just like and I think you saw this progression from the first season on to even the second season, where the first season was like a combination of like regular people and
Right.
yeah, obviously like Suri could just pick them apart so easily. It was so easy for her, but also she's a queen and it's like so easy to root for her. And then last season rather, you had Trishelle and what was his name who won?
The guy that was kind of flirting with Phaedra, and I'm blanking on it.
Yeah, yeah.
But they knew that Sandra last season wasn't a traitor at the
Mm,
end. They knew, and they eliminated her anyway because they wanted the money to
yeah.
themselves. So I want a traitor to win in the sense of like it's just more fair because the faithfuls can play these stupid games at the end where they want more money, so they eliminate people that they know aren't traitors. But I don't know how it's. I'm still rooting for Carolyn. I'm not rooting for
Yeah.
Danielle. But if they're gonna recruit someone on Thursday, right? That's
I
like
think that's what they're hinting toward. Yeah.
so they should. I don't know who
Yeah.
they should do, but I'm obsessed with Gabby. I've been obsessed
Mm,
with her since The Bachelorette or The Bachelor when she was on
mm,
Clayton season,
uh-huh.
and
And now she's a lesbian.
I know.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, honestly, it makes sense. Like what
Yeah.
when someone
Yeah.
comes out as queer and you're like, oh, I could have seen that before. I get it. She's so funny, and her girlfriend, Robbie Hoffman, I saw last week was performing at the Bell House where we've done our shows before, and
Oh,
I
cool.
just missed the show by a night checking, so I'm going
Oh,
down but I would love to see Robbie live at one point. Anyway, some
yeah.
cool contestants. I hope they bring Dorinda back next season because she
Yeah. I
doesn't, she didn't get her shine.
That'd be too. Also, like they're all, I mean, not bringing Kate back as a contestant, but she was in the preview again. Like they are obsessed with Kate from Below Decks, which is
Right, right. It's all
it's
right.
fine. But yeah, I'm really excited. I'm obviously rooting for Carolyn as well, and fingers crossed. Like again, Danielle's just played such a bad game. Like people try to defend her, but it's just like, come on. Like what are you watching
Are
the
you
same
kidding
show?
me?
Yeah.
No, and her outfits have been just absolutely gobsmacking. Like, what was that big tan hat that she was wearing?
Oh God, yeah.
Unfortunate. And so she's not even giving me something to root for in terms of fierceness, and that's a fatal sin.
Absolutely. All right. With that being said, Emma, again, I'm super grateful for you coming on the Crimson Misery podcast. My first ever guest on this podcast, and I'm super happy it was you. I've been a big fan for years now, and it really truly means a lot for me. So thank you for taking the time out of your day to do this for
Appreciate it,
me.
Will. Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you so much.
And for those of you who are not aware, Emma, where can they find you? Where can the people find you?
Come to the Majority Report. Check us out. We are live every day, noon Eastern, every weekday, talking about politics and the news of the world. Check us out over there.
All right. Well, with that said, thank you all very much. And Emma, do you want to let's get these people out of here with a bye bye
All
for
right. Bye
all.
bye.
Bye bye.